They found the diamonds hidden in my locker, all of them, except the most expensive one. And suddenly, I wasn't just a crew member anymore. I was a thief who stole the fortune from the richest woman on the ship. My name is James Holland, and in the summer of 1952, I was working as a steward aboard the SS Meridian Queen, the most luxurious cruise liner sailing between New York and Havana. I'd been at sea for 3 years, serving champagne to millionaires and making beds for people who spent more on a single night than I earned in a year. But nothing prepared me for what happened when Annie Rose boarded that ship. Because 5 days into that voyage, her jewelry vanished from a locked safe, and somehow I became the prime suspect in a theft I didn't commit.
Annie Rose wasn't just another passenger. She was the kind of woman who made headlines just by stepping off a train. 28 years old, daughter of the Rose textile empire, and according to the society pages, worth more than $12 million. She boarded the Meridian Queen with 7 trunks, a personal maid named Catherine, and enough jewelry to fill a small vault. I remember the day she arrived, July 14th. The dock was chaos, photographers everywhere, flashbulbs popping like fireworks. She wore a cream-colored suit and dark sunglasses, even though it was overcast. Her maid followed 3 steps behind, nervous, clutching a small leather case like her life depended on it. My job was simple. I was assigned to the first-class deck, which meant I took care of the suites on the starboard side. Miss Rose had booked the Royal Suite, the largest cabin on the ship. 2 bedrooms, a sitting room with ocean views, and a private safe built into the wall behind an oil painting of some European countryside. The first 3 days passed without incident. I brought breakfast trays, fresh towels, evening turn-down service. Miss Rose was polite but distant. She barely looked at me. To her, I was just part of the furniture. Catherine, the maid, was different. She always said thank you, always seemed worried about something. I noticed she never left Miss Rose's side except when absolutely necessary. On the 4th night, everything changed. It was just after midnight when the ship's chief steward, Mr. Bernard, knocked on my cabin door. I was already asleep, exhausted from a double shift covering for another crew member who'd gotten sick. Bernard looked pale, even in the dim hallway light. "Holland, get dressed. We have a situation." I followed him up 3 decks to the Royal Suite. The door was open. Inside, Miss Rose sat on the velvet sofa wrapped in a silk robe, her face streaked with tears. Catherine stood near the window, wringing her hands. Captain Morrison was there too, along with the ship's security officer, a former police detective named Warren. The safe was open, empty. "They're gone," Miss Rose said, her voice shaking. "All of them. My diamonds, my emeralds, my mother's pearls, everything." Warren stepped forward. "Miss Rose, when did you last see the jewelry?" "This afternoon, around 4 o'clock. I wore the diamond bracelet to lunch, then put everything back before my nap. I locked the safe myself. I always do." "And the combination?"
Only 3 people know it. Me, Catherine, and... She paused, looking directly at me. "And I gave it to the steward, James Holland. He needed it yesterday to place fresh flowers inside because I keep my perfumes in there." My stomach dropped. That part was true. She had given me the combination the day before because she wanted the safe aired out. Some of her perfume bottles had leaked, and the smell was overwhelming. I'd opened it, cleaned it, left it open for 20 minutes, then locked it again. But I never touched the jewelry. I barely even looked at it. Warren turned to me. "Is this accurate, Holland?" "Yes, sir, but I didn't take anything. I wouldn't." "Where were you between 4 o'clock this afternoon and now?" "Working. I served dinner on the upper deck from 6 to 9, then helped with the evening service until 11. At least 30 people saw me." Warren nodded slowly, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. The problem was simple. 3 people had the combination. Miss Rose wasn't going to rob herself. Catherine had been with her all evening. That left me. "We'll need to search your quarters," Warren said. "Of course, search whatever you need." But even as I said it, a cold fear settled in my chest, because I knew how these things worked. I was a crew member. She was an heiress. If someone needed to take the fall for this, it wasn't going to be her.
They searched my cabin at 2 in the morning. Warren went through everything. My clothes, my books, the small box where I kept letters from my mother back in Boston. Nothing, because there was nothing to find. But the search didn't end there. Over the next 2 days, the entire crew was questioned. Every storage room, every supply closet, every corner of that ship was turned inside out. The passengers were getting nervous. Word spread fast on a vessel that size. By breakfast on the 5th day, everyone knew about the theft. I kept working, kept my head down, but I could feel the stares. Other crew members avoided me in the hallways. Even the ones I'd worked with for years suddenly had nothing to say. In their minds, I was already guilty. Miss Rose stayed in her suite most of the time. The few times I saw her, she looked different. The confidence was gone. She seemed smaller somehow. Fragile. Catherine barely spoke to anyone. She moved through the ship like a ghost, always looking over her shoulder. On the 6th day, Captain Morrison called a meeting in his quarters. Warren was there, along with Bernard and 2 other senior officers. They sat me down across from them like I was on trial. "Holland, we have a problem," the captain said. "The jewelry is worth approximately $200,000. Miss Rose has insurance, but this is a criminal matter. If we dock in Havana tomorrow without answers, the authorities will get involved. This becomes an international incident." "I understand, sir, but I didn't take anything." Warren leaned forward. "Then help us understand something. You had access, you had the combination, and you have debts." My face went hot. "What are you talking about? We did some checking. Your brother, medical bills. You send half your wages home every month to help pay them off. That's a lot of pressure for a steward making $60 a month." I felt like I'd been punched. Yes, my brother had polio. Yes, the treatment was expensive. Yes, I sent money home. But that didn't make me a thief. I would never steal from a passenger. Never. The captain studied me for a long moment. "I want to believe you, Holland, but right now, you're the only person with means and opportunity."
They let me go, but the message was clear. I was running out of time. That evening, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The safe had been locked. Only 3 people knew the combination. Miss Rose wouldn't rob herself. Catherine had no reason to, and I hadn't touched the jewelry. Unless someone else had access. I sat up in my bunk. The safe combination. Miss Rose said only 3 people knew it, but that wasn't entirely true. I'd written it down, just once on a small piece of paper, because I was afraid I'd forget it when I was cleaning. I'd thrown the paper away afterward, torn it up and tossed it in the trash bin near the crew galley. But what if someone had found it? I got dressed and went up to the galley. It was nearly midnight, and the kitchen was empty except for one night cook preparing bread for the morning. I checked the trash bins, but they'd been emptied days ago. Everything was gone. I was about to leave when I noticed something. The crew roster board on the wall. It listed everyone's assignments and shifts.
My name was there, along with my duties, Royal Suite Steward. And written in pencil beneath it, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was a series of numbers, the safe combination. Someone had copied it from my note before I threw it away. Someone had been planning this, but who? I spent the next morning watching everyone, the crew, the passengers, anyone who came near the first-class deck. I felt like I was losing my mind, seeing suspects everywhere. The sous chef who'd asked me questions about Miss Rose, the bellhop who'd been fired from his last ship for stealing, even the elderly couple in the suite next door, who always seemed too interested in who was coming and going. Then on the 7th day, something happened that changed everything. I was delivering afternoon tea to the Baxter suite when I overheard a conversation. The door was slightly open, and inside 2 passengers were talking. I recognized the voices. Mr. Philip Chambers and his wife, Alana. They were old money from Philadelphia, traveling with enough luggage to move permanently. "You heard they're searching the crew quarters again?" Mrs. Chambers said. "Good. Someone needs to hang for this. That poor girl." "Poor? Philip, she's worth millions. The insurance will cover it." "That's not the point, Alana. It's the principle." There was a pause. Then Mrs. Chambers lowered her voice. "You don't think she did it herself, do you? What are you talking about?"
Insurance fraud. It happens more than you think. Rich people getting richer. Don't be ridiculous. Why would Annie Rose need to fake a robbery? Maybe she doesn't need to. Maybe she wants to. Maybe she's not as wealthy as everyone thinks. I froze. Could that be possible? I'd never considered it. But the more I thought about it, the more questions appeared. Why had Miss Rose given me the safe combination in the first place? Why had she insisted on storing perfume bottles in a jewelry safe? Why had Catherine been so nervous the entire voyage? I needed more information. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went to the ship's radio room. The operator, a man named Eddie, who I'd played cards with a few times, was on duty. "Eddie, I need a favor." He looked up from his equipment. "Holland, heard you're in some trouble. That's why I need help. Can you send a telegram to New York, to the Rose Textile Company?" "What kind of telegram?" "Just a simple inquiry. Ask about Annie Rose. Ask if she's currently acting as a company representative, or if there's any business issues." Eddie frowned. "That's going to cost money, and it's going to take time to get a response." "I'll pay. Please, it's important." He studied me, then nodded. "All right, but if this gets me in trouble, you owe me more than money." The response came back 18 hours later, just as we were approaching Havana. Holland found me on the main deck and handed me a folded piece of paper. I read it twice to make sure I understood. Annie Rose had been removed from the company board 6 months earlier. There were rumors of excessive spending, debts, and disagreements with her father before he passed away. The family fortune was still intact, but her personal access to it had been significantly restricted by trustees. She needed money, and she needed it fast. I went straight to Captain Morrison's quarters. Warren was already there, preparing for our arrival in port. "Captain, I need to speak with you. Both of you." They listened as I explained everything. The telegram, the overheard conversation, the suspicious circumstances around the safe combination. When I finished, Warren shook his head. "That's a serious accusation, Holland. You're saying a passenger staged her own robbery?" "I'm saying it's possible, and I think we should search her suite again, more carefully this time."
The captain considered this. "If you're wrong, you'll be arrested the moment we dock. I know. But if I'm right, you'll have your answer." 20 minutes later, we stood outside the royal suite with Bernard and 2 other officers. Miss Rose answered the door, surprised. "Captain Morrison, is something wrong?" "Miss Rose, we need to conduct another search of your suite. We have new information." Her face went pale. I don't understand. You already searched everywhere. Not everywhere. We entered. This time, Warren wasn't looking for jewelry in obvious places. He was looking for hiding spots. He checked inside lamp bases, behind wall panels, inside the hollow curtain rods. Catherine watched from the corner, trembling. Then Warren opened Miss Rose's largest trunk, the one she'd kept locked since boarding. Inside were dresses, shoes, hat boxes. He lifted out each item carefully, checking underneath. At the bottom, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a leather pouch. Warren opened it. Diamonds spilled onto the bed, emeralds, pearls, every piece of jewelry that had been reported stolen, except one. The diamond necklace, the most valuable piece. It was missing. Miss Rose collapsed onto the sofa. She didn't cry. She didn't deny anything. She just sat there, staring at the floor. "Why?" Captain Morrison asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The trustees, they control everything. My father left me nothing except an allowance. I can't even sell my own jewelry without their permission. But the insurance was mine. $200,000, no questions asked. I was going to start over, go somewhere they couldn't control me." "And the necklace?" She looked up, and for the first time I saw something like defiance in her eyes. "That's mine. It was my mother's. I'm keeping it." Warren stepped forward. "Miss Rose, you're confessing to insurance fraud." "I suppose I am." Catherine finally spoke, her voice shaking. "She made me help her, said she'd fire me, ruin my reputation. I didn't want to. I'm so sorry." The captain turned to me. "Holland, it seems you were right, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and angry. This woman had been willing to destroy my life, my career, my reputation, just to get insurance money. She'd put that jewelry in my locker while I was working, knowing I'd be blamed, knowing I couldn't fight back."
The next few hours moved fast. Warren placed Miss Rose under cabin arrest until we docked. Catherine was separated and questioned further. It turned out Miss Rose had convinced her maid to help plant the jewelry in my locker on the 6th day, planning to discover it there and seal my fate. But Catherine had gotten cold feet and removed the jewelry before Warren's second search, hiding it back in Miss Rose's trunk. That hesitation saved me. When we docked in Havana, Cuban authorities were waiting. American officials had been contacted. Miss Rose was taken into custody the moment she stepped off the ship. The passengers watched in silence as she was led down the gangway, no longer the glamorous heiress, just a woman in handcuffs. The newspapers had a field day. Textile heiress arrested for insurance fraud. High society scandal at sea. The diamond necklace that vanished. That last headline was everywhere because despite the confession, despite the recovery of the other jewelry, the diamond necklace was never found. Authorities searched her luggage again. They questioned Catherine for hours. They even searched the entire ship one more time. Nothing. Miss Rose refused to say where it was. She just smiled when they asked, like she was holding on to one last secret they couldn't take from her. Some people think she had an accomplice who got off the ship with it in Havana. Others believe she sold it before we even left New York and used a fake in the safe. The insurance company suspected she'd hidden it somewhere to retrieve later after serving her sentence. Me? I think she threw it overboard. One last act of control. If she couldn't have her freedom, at least she could keep that one thing from everyone else. That necklace, worth over $50,000, sitting at the bottom of the Caribbean Sea. Annie Rose was sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud. She served 18 months before being released on parole. By then, her family had disowned her completely. The trustees sold off her remaining assets to repay the insurance company. She disappeared after that. Some say she moved to Europe. Others claim she went to Mexico. Nobody knows for sure. Catherine was let go with a warning. She testified against Miss Rose in exchange for immunity. Last I heard, she was working for a family in Boston, trying to rebuild her life. As for me, I was cleared of all charges. Captain Morrison personally apologized and wrote a letter of recommendation that helped me transfer to a better position on a transatlantic liner. But I never forgot those 7 days. The fear of being accused, the helplessness of knowing nobody would believe me, the way people looked at me like I was already guilty. I worked at sea for another 15 years before retiring. Met my wife on a crossing to Southampton in 1956. Had 2 daughters, built a good life. But I never wore jewelry, never even bought my wife expensive pieces. Couldn't stand looking at diamonds after that summer. Every now and then I still think about that necklace. Wonder if it really is at the bottom of the ocean, or if Annie Rose was smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Maybe she did have a partner. Maybe it's hidden somewhere, waiting to be found. Some mysteries don't get solved. Some secrets stay buried. That's what I learned aboard the SS Meridian Queen in the summer of 1952.
If this mystery kept you guessing, there are more untold stories from that golden era waiting to be uncovered. So don't miss a single case. Subscribe now and sail with us through more mysteries from America's golden age.